Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on building your successful HPAS application. I'm David Parker, I'm Head of Hydrographic Programs at the UK Hydrographic Office and also Chair of the IHO's Hydrographic Surveys Working Group, but importantly in this context, a UK member of the HPAS Steering Committee, and I led the UK-based team who developed the HPAS concept. Welcome to our first HPAS webinar, which is designed to assist applications to the scheme. We'll start the webinar with an introduction to HPAS, mindful that we've got people on the call with little knowledge of HPAS, ranging through to people who have already applied. In fact, we've even got members of the HPAS assessment panel on the call. Then Yvonne and Huibert-Jan will cover the details of the application process and common issues that arise. We will then have the remaining time to deal with questions which you will later be able to submit via the chat function, which until then is disabled, as well as pre-submitted questions already received. So, what is HPAS? It was originally created by the Hydrographic Society UK and Ireland, but then rolled out on a multinational basis by the International Federation of Hydrographic Societies to ensure that multinational footprint. HPAS is designed to assist and support individual qualified and experienced hydrographic professionals in demonstrating their competency, capability and development of their careers. HPAS is designed to evaluate and assess applicants against the IBSC S5 standards with pathways and competency levels developed to reflect knowledge and experience while demanding high standards of ethics and conduct. In addition, HPAS supports reciprocal mutual recognition agreements with other individual schemes already in place with the Canadian ACLS scheme, and conversations are underway for both the Australasian and US scheme. So, as I say, we've already done it with Canada, which is also an IBSC recognised scheme, and we're seeking to do that with the other schemes. The idea being that a candidate who becomes accredited really on any one of those schemes can move between those jurisdictions without having to go through another process. That's our aim. We've already got that agreement with Canada, and yeah, hopefully that will be expanded. So this accreditation process, we hope, will raise the profile of the hydrographic surveying profession, encourage the highest levels of professionalism within the hydrographic community, and ensure confidence in employers of the hydrographer's ability. HPAS is designed to evaluate and assess individual applicants against those S5 standards, but also the pathways and competency levels developed will reflect the skills and experience that they've got, not just that education. And to ensure the best alignment with an existing and recognised structure, we've sought that recognition from the FIG IHO ICA, International Board on Standards of Competence, for hydrographic surveyors and nautical cartographers. It's a mouthful. You can see why we say IBSC. And IBSC indeed gave their recognition of HPAS formally in 2022. Next slide, please. Okay, so on to HPAS levels and pathways. Just a very brief explanation. And of course, this is all described in much detail in the framework documents and applicant guide that we'll see later. So starting with affiliate. An affiliate is really just somebody who has an interest in working in hydrography and will be starting out within their career, or indeed a student. So it could be a student on a hydrographic educational program, a trainee, an apprentice, or indeed an experienced surveyor, perhaps in another geomatics kind of discipline, who's transferring across to a specialism within hydrography. And it's really designed to give the firm foundation for building up that evidence of experience and also the continued professional development to start getting it logged in a formal process. An accredited level 2 hydrographic professional will typically be a practical surveyor capable of performing various tasks and executing survey instructions for field survey projects, and will have met the defined criteria. The fastest route to level 2 accreditation is having done a Cat B educational program, but it is not the only way. As long as all of the educational elements and the experience elements can be fulfilled, there are other routes, but they do take longer. Level 1 is for those who have the required educational basis and maintained their experience. They will have built on their initial formal survey qualifications, gained relevant experience and developed their career, and should have progressed into a supervisory or senior role. So basically, level 1 shows an employer that this person has the ability to go out and lead a survey team in the field. A level 1 hydrographic survey professional will be experienced in the planning and execution of hydrographic surveys and will have led complex multidisciplinary field projects within a variety of sectors, ideally. And again, the fastest route to level 1 accreditation is through a recognised Cat A programme, but again, it's not the only way. Finally, level 0. And by the way, that was a working title we applied way back when, and we've never found a better solution. So please, if you've got a better way of attributing this highest level within the accreditation scheme, our ears are open. Level 0, as it's currently called, is the most advanced and highest level attainable. It's for those hydrographic survey professionals who've continued to develop and advance their technical skills and knowledge, whilst also developing management and leadership attributes that have allowed them to become people of repute and influence within the profession. They're very likely to be office-based rather than work in the field, but there may be exceptions to that. And again, different entry pathways dictate the level of education and years of experience required, and that's all detailed within the documents. So next slide, please, slide 7. So the HPAS scheme, in terms of benefits to individuals, the HPAS scheme promotes the highest levels of professionalism within our industry by providing a clear professional development route with improved recognition of those skills and experience that have been attained. This will in turn allow for additional routes into and within the profession and clearer access to roles requiring that set standard or capability. And the scheme will also encourage those at higher levels of the scheme, we hope, to mentor those who are just starting out on their careers. So take that on board. If you're at the beginning of your career in hydrography and seeking this accreditation pathway, then seek out those that have already gone through accreditation and use them as a mentor. So next slide. In terms of benefits to organisations, well, it's the same list really, as well as it will help categorise professionals against agreed and a transparent standard, and it will provide a framework for staff to develop within their profession. And I know many companies, including the organisation that I work for, the UK Hydrographic Office, we're always seeking ways of providing such a framework to improve that sort of staff development and improve staff retention and give that sort of clear development pathway for people's careers to assist them in their sort of career aspirations. Also, HPAS is a multinational scheme rather than a local or national scheme. And with those equivalency agreements that are in development, it will mean that accreditation becomes a sort of truly international norm. And this will mean that companies do not have to worry that staff don't have the right accreditation for a particular jurisdiction. As I said earlier, they can, once that's in place, move between jurisdictions. And for contracting organisations as well, it sets a minimum standard of competence for each of individual professionals. This can be combined with their educational background and experience to make a fully rounded judgment on somebody's suitability, whether that be a full-time employee or a freelancer, for example. Okay, so that's my introduction. I hope it looked good at your end because I can't see a thing. So I'll now pass you over to the fantastic Yvonne, our HPAS coordinator, who's going to lead us through the next stage.
Thank you, David. just to confirm, everybody could see your slides. I just checked with a couple of the attendees, so thank you very much for that introduction. My part will be very brief, but I wanted you to know that I'm your main point of contact for any HPAS related queries that you may have throughout your journey. I, on your behalf, can also liaise with the committee and panel on any detailed queries that you might have during your HPAS journey regarding your experience or qualification. So once you've submitted an application, I undertake the administrative review of your application documents. And I want to ensure that you have the best chance of providing the crucial documents, making sure they're in place before I can deem your application complete and send them on to the panel for review. So I'm there to support you throughout your entire HPAS journey for any queries, and this process can also then involve requests for additional information to your application, some amends from you, as your application does need to be deemed complete before I can send it to the panel for their technical review. So I'm there to support you. Once I've received your documents, I'll look through them and liaise with you about that. So how to ensure that you do have all the documentation completed to avoid any delays and the best opportunity for you. Firstly, strongly advise that you read the application guidelines very carefully. This does set out all the expectations and documentation required for the level that you're applying for. So what I want to say here is, why not use the interactive tool that we've just launched that was provided in the email that I sent to you in advance of this webinar. This will help you assess the level that you should apply for and the documents required. Before submitting, gather all your documents and check that they are all present. You will find a checklist on everything that we provide, including the applicant guidelines, the interactive tool that I just mentioned, and in the online application form. So use that to your advantage and make sure it's all there before submitting. Specifically, we just want to draw your attention to the logbooks. Make sure that they are signed and dated by your party chief, supervisor, and your certificates are certified and as specified in the applicant guide. This will go a long way to ensuring that there are no gaps or doubts when we receive your application. This is the sort of thing that I do send back to candidates on a regular basis to add to. Ensure your reports and critiques are proofread. We do sometimes read them and wish that you had taken extra care, and clearly display the level of involvement and experience it states that is required for the level you are applying for. So double check everything that you're sending in terms of its completeness and also the content. So as said at the start, you could email me with any queries prior to submitting your application. If you are unsure of anything throughout the point in this whole process, just reach out by email. We'll provide all of the email details at the end, and you've received emails from me for the webinar link, so you have that here. I'm here to help. So that's my part of the role for HPAS. Once your application is complete, I then provide it to the panel for review. So I'm now going to hand over to Huibert-Jan Lekkerkerk, who is the HPAS panel chair, to give you more insight as to what happens once they've received the applications.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yes, my name is Huibert-Jan Lekkerkerk, which in any other language than Dutch is a bit hard to pronounce. I'm in the function of panel chair here. However, I'm also senior lecturer at both the CAT A at the Maritime Institute Willem Barents in the Netherlands, as well as on the CAT B course of skill trade in the Netherlands. I would like to give you a little bit of an overview of the way the panel looks at your submission, and that can help you gear your submission towards a potentially positive application. First of all, the panel is a panel of peers. So we are a group of hydrographic surveyors. We come from the member countries of the IFHS, and we look at your application from a professional hydrographer's perspective. One of the important things is that we look in detail if you meet the requirements for the level you seek on top of the documents. But we're going to assume that they're all signed, that they're all in order, because otherwise they won't be passed to the panel at all. So if we look at the submission documents and if we look at the content, one of the things that we see quite often is that the application is not for the correct level. And that depends on two things. One is education, the other is experience. So let me focus on education first. For the levels other than the affiliate, the requirement is that you either show you have a CAT A or a CAT B approved training, so a recognized course from the IHO. And that means it was recognized at the time you took it. We know that some institutes lose their recognition for one reason or another. But the question is, was it recognized at the time of your graduation? Or otherwise, that you can show that you've got equivalent formal training. Now, equivalent is of course a difficult thing to identify, or as we look upon it, actually quite simple, because you need to meet the same requirements as you would have had to meet had you done a full CAT A or CAT B. Now, what we see quite often is that the topic has been covered in another course, but not necessarily to the level required. So the IHO in their S5 document states that you can either do a topic at basic level, which is basically theoretical knowledge, intermediate, which means you can apply the knowledge, or advanced, which means you can also analyze from that perspective. So make certain that you've met the required level, make certain that you've covered all of the topics, and if not, contact us. If you cannot meet all the requirements, but you're almost there, contact us. If you're halfway there, you need additional training. For any courses that are not already known, so they're not a CAT A or a CAT B, make certain that you supply enough evidence so we can assess that course, so we understand what it's about, what the topic covers are. And again, we understand that it might be difficult for courses that were given a long time ago, but it does help us and it makes the assessment easier for both of us in the end. Something else, after you have been accredited, we do expect you to follow continuous professional development, but also if you pass between the grades, you need to demonstrate that you've done continuous professional development. Now, there's a whole detailed set of requirements in the applicant guide in the scheme that tells you how to meet those requirements, but think about that. And if you've done them, do not hesitate to supply them, even if they're not required. They do demonstrate that you're an active person in keeping up your knowledge. So that's the first step. The next step is you need to demonstrate you have enough experience. And as David said before, that's about field experience, it's about supervisory time, it's about management time. And that depends on the level you seek. So if you look at the short version of the scheme, the diagram that David showed, it just says you need 2 years of experience maybe. However, those 2 years come with requirements. Read those requirements and ensure that you've got enough specific time for the level you're seeking. And if we talk about sufficient time, if we talk about field work, we count about 100 field days a year as 1 year. And then the other half of the year, the other roughly 100 days, need to be spent on hydrographic related tasks, but it can be data processing or specification or things like that. Now, of course, if you only meet 95 days, we will have a look at that, but make certain you have enough time. And also make certain that that time is properly documented and cross-referenced. So make certain that your resume shows what you've done as an outline. Make certain the logbooks show the same projects, show the same times and dates, and make certain your experience mapping, which is another document, also reflects the same time and experience. So that makes it easy for the panel to see that everything comes together. Then, and this is probably one of the more difficult ones sometimes, but you need, especially for level 2, it's a survey report. For level 0, it can also be other documents, but you need to demonstrate what you've done in a survey report. Now, a lot of survey reports are run-of-the-mill. They're automatically generated. Each one of them looks the same. It's not the ones the panel is looking for. So what the panel would like to see is what your contribution was to a project. So make certain if you send in a report that it shows what you have done, whether that's by name or whether you can identify it or you can say these were my parts, but something like that. Because otherwise it's just a survey report. And to be honest, the panel has seen enough survey reports. Something else is make certain it's recent or as recent as possible. So if you're applying for a level 2 role, don't hand us a survey report from 8 years ago, but hand us one from maybe the last 2 years so we can see that you're still active. Like I said, make certain that it reflects your tasks. So for level 2, make certain it's operational. For level 1, make certain that it shows that you were the party chief or the surveyor in charge of something like that. Ideally, but we know that's not always possible, it should reflect all the phases of a project. If it's focused on just one, maybe look for another report, and there's a minimum number of reports. Technically, there's not a maximum, but please spare the board a flood of reports. I mean, we need to go through them and they need to add to your application. So we prefer one report that covers everything, but if not, don't hesitate to send 2 reports. And again, make certain that your report cross-references to your experience. So make certain we understand where it fits in your development timeline and where you were in your career when you were part of that project. Now, probably the most important document that we have is the critique. And it might not have started out in the original framework as the most important document, but from a panel perspective, we often find we start by looking at your critique. And the critique should reflect on your survey report on that project. But it shouldn't be the technical as such, so we do not need a rerun of the project. What we would like to see in a critique is what you have done, what your ideas were, how you think the project could have been improved looking on it afterwards. So make certain we understand what sort of surveyor you've been on that project. There's also a section that allows you to write a wider contribution. If you've done presentations, if you've helped the department set up specifications on a project, do not hesitate to mention that sort of information. So make certain that we understand who you are from your critique. Because that, in the end, makes life a lot easier to us. So to summarize it, from the panel perspective, but that also goes for the coordinator, as you've heard, make certain that if you do an application, that you look for the right level and that you supply evidence, not just the right sort of evidence, but also the right content of evidence. So that when we go through it, we can form a picture of who you are as a hydrographic surveyor. And of course, make certain it cross-references, it's clear, it's signed, and everything else. When the panel is in doubt, we do have the options to seek additional information. And the first step would be to come back to you and ask for additional information. Alternatively, we might also contact some of your references or referees. So you may want to make certain that they are aware that you've named them in your application, and you do need to do that. So we might contact them and say, okay, you've got experience with this person. What sort of hydrographic surveyor are they? Another step we could do, and it's not all of them, it's quite often a combination or one of them, is we can have an interview with you. And in the interview, we will focus on the aspects in your application that were not clear enough to us. So to summarize, make certain everything's all right and it should be smooth sailing. You know what you've done and where you stand. When in doubt, contact Yvonne, and she will probably forward the question to one of the panel to see what would be the most suitable level. That's not a guarantee you will meet it, but it is a guarantee that you're not aiming too high or maybe too low. We've seen both things happening. So that's about it on the panel perspective. All the details you can find in these two documents. One is the scheme framework. That's the highly detailed formal document that was also approved by the IBSC, as David mentioned. The applicant guide drills that down to what you need to supply. And like Yvonne said, we've just released an interactive tool that sort of tries to guide you through the applicant guide and the scheme and summarize what's relevant. However, that can never contain all the details. So when in doubt, look through these documents, or like I said, contact us if you can't work it out from the documents. So having said that, this was an overview. The chat function's just been enabled. If everything's all right, so you should be able to type your questions in the chat function. We will monitor them, but just to start off with a question that we've already had, David. We get a lot of questions about the reports and the question, how recent do they need to be survey reports? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, okay. So when we look through the pre-submitted questions, because Yvonne invited those to be submitted in advance as well, yeah, a number of them had different issues around reports, and it was around, and I'm trying to sort of take a blended approach to those questions. They're around things like confidentiality of reports. I'm not able to share it, and security. You know, there's similar issues. An advice around, you know, well, this is a collaborative project with 50 people on it. How do I kind of deal with that? So I'd say, first of all, you should be aware that really none of these things are necessarily a sort of binary yes/no part of the process. A deficiency in one of the evidence areas should not necessarily prevent a successful application, because the panel will be taking a view on the combined evidence provided, as Huibert-Jan has said, and that may go all the way through to an interview. If they think you're right nearly there but not quite sure, then that's what the interviews are for. We did discuss with the IBSC, in fact, when the scheme was being developed, the issue of candidates not being able to release reports for commercial or security reasons. And I have to say, it was their quite stringent view that it was an issue that the candidate would need to overcome themselves. We couldn't just say, okay, we understand that we can't see your reports, we'll accept that. So we had to find a way around the issue. And this could obviously be through redaction within the report. This could also be writing a separate report about a particular project, but excluding that separate activity. And as we've already said, the panel are most interested really in the critique. The report is there to give the sort of foundation of that evidence, but the critique is where we get to see your analytical skills and where you're sort of, you know, you're able to sort of critique the work that you've done, how it might be improved in the future, etc. So, you know, if your company does not normally write a report of survey, because that was another question we had, I think from South Africa. Well, if you've done a specific project, then maybe you just need to write that report yourself. And obviously dealing with those security and commercial issues, you know, you'll just have to find a way through it. The IBSC were pretty clear on this, that any scheme that went with sort of completely blind to reports of survey was not going to be accepted. The collaborative reports, also fine. Most reports are collaborative efforts. We just need to be really clear on the role that you played in the project and how you influenced that successful outcome. And it could be that you add an addendum to that that report. You know, you could give it a cover sheet and say, just to be really clear, this is what I did in this report. These are the elements I led on, for example. I don't know if we've had examples of that, but you know, it's about augmenting that information with what you did and the outcomes that were achieved because of you specifically. Obviously, for level 1 and higher, you also need to really demonstrate your leadership capacity within that. I'd also say for the higher levels, you can use other documents. We've already mentioned survey specifications as one example, field procedures, things like that. Even work on sort of other standard validation reports, perhaps. They can all contribute to creating that picture. So I hope that helps. I'll stop there and hand back to Yvonne.
Okay, we've had some more questions in. Thank you everyone for submitting your questions. There's a few similar topics coming through, but just a quick one on to either Huibert or David. Is there a way someone could gain an HPAS accreditation without any of the recognised official qualifications, Cat A, B topics, for example, covered in other courses, even if they have surpassed the experience aspect of the requirements? Does that make sense?
That one? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, do.
The simple answer is yes, you can, as long as you can demonstrate that you have a similar knowledge, and that should ideally come from the courses you followed, formal courses. If there are some minor gaps and you can show through experience, through a report, through a critique, possibly through an interview, that you've mastered those missing ones, then the answer is definitely yes. I also saw a question coming in, how do I get these additional formal courses? That's one that I'm a bit hesitant to answer too quickly. Because I'm involved in two, and we do have a program specifically for this sort of situations, but we're not the only ones. So there are various courses. They can also come from software courses, hardware courses, as long as they show the required level. And I'll be honest, it's the level 1 qualifications that might be the hardest to find if you don't have a formal Cat A or Cat B, but it's definitely not impossible. And we've had candidates without a formal Cat A or Cat B recognized course who have passed the levels. So it depends on how much effort you've spent in your career obtaining that missing information from the courses you've already had.
If I can add to that as well, because you know, it's around the specific Cat A and B question, but I think more widely about, I'd almost read this as saying without any educational kind of background in the subject. And if that was the question, I'd say no, but because you need to have that educational background. It just doesn't need to be necessarily through the Cat A or Cat B recognised courses, although they are by far the quickest route. So you need to be able to demonstrate to the panel that through some means or another, you've achieved that educational input in your background against a range of a number of the topics listed in S5, S5A or B, depending on which level you're applying for. So you may have done that in many different ways, and so we've had successful applicants who've completed things like trying to think, marine geography, I think. And they've obtained the right level because they've also done other sort of gap filling education, and they've got the experience to demonstrate that they can operate successfully at that level. It's meant they've had to wait longer to apply effectively before they're applicable, but they did find that way through.
Another quick, this is a quick question to both of you, which we could probably do quite quickly, and I'll follow that up with another quick question, hopefully, more general. How long does it take? How long does the process take to get the certificate? Is there a quick answer to that, or is it more detailed? I'll put that to either Huibert or David.
Well, I would almost say you're probably the best to answer that because you know the timelines for the application just as well as we do. But essentially, if everything is smooth sailing, it should be within maximum 3 months, hopefully a bit quicker. But it also depends on how many applications we get and how busy the panel is and when we can schedule meetings. But we try to conclude the initial steps within a month, and then we sometimes have follow-up, like I said, interviews or other questions. So at most, I would say 3 months. Preferably, we try within a month.
And again,
Thanks.
just to add to that, when we initially started off, we really had trouble recruiting an HPAS coordinator, and now we've kind of struck gold with Yvonne, and it's running much more smoothly. So it had a bit more of a bumpy start while we found our way in terms of operational delivery, but hopefully now applicants are seeing a pretty slick process and really good coordination from Yvonne.
Thanks both. Another quick general question. Can any applications be accepted if their countries are not among the IFHS member countries? I think we can answer that one quite quickly.
I would say the answer is yes, and we have. You may want, but that's on the last slide, you need to pay a little bit higher fees for the application because if you're a member of one of the societies, your application is sponsored in part by the IFHS.
Okay, if nothing else to add, I have another quick question here. Does all the evidence provided for the applications need to be recent if there has been a career break, for example? Either Huibert or David can take that one.
Yeah, it's a bit of a panel question. For the audience, we decided that the requirement questions would go to David and I would do the more panel assessment questions. So that's why we're a bit thinking who shall take the question every now and then. Does it have to be recent? No, in the sense that if there is a break and you can demonstrate proper knowledge and you're currently active, then the answer is no. But what you do need to realize is that to keep your accreditation, you need to keep working in the field because you need to submit continuous professional development records and you need to stay active. So past we can overlook, we can work with that. Towards the future, we are assuming a sort of unbroken career in hydrography for as long as you want to remain accredited.
Okay, I'll just move on to another question about references that are requested as part of all the documentation. Someone's asking that could we give a bit more information? We say in the documentation that they can't be colleagues or managers, but most of the people that they're working with and know what they do, within their projects are their managers and colleagues. So what would we recommend in that circumstance?
Okay, I can cover that. So this is one of those elements of kind of best endeavours are requested. Really, what we're looking for is to get one step removed from those day-to-day contacts, colleagues, friends, people that you're working with, to give it some to ensure that sort of credibility of the referee. So for example, it could be a reference from if you're a survey contracting company, what better than to get a reference from your client that you've been contracting for? That would be a really good example. So it's basically just trying to get one step removed from your immediate manager. The concern is obviously that if you've got a friendly relationship with your manager, that it won't look quite as robust as somebody like an end client or something along those lines. So just try to find a suitable person who's aware of the work you've done and the contribution you've made, but isn't in that sort of day-to-day contact with you. I don't know if Hubert's got anything to add.
No, actually, no. I think that summarizes up quite well.
Okay, I'm just going to follow up with a pre-submitted question. We invited those from the attendees as well. So sent in a questionnaire. Somebody was asking about the logbooks. They have concerns that they can't always locate the relevant supervisors to sign and certify their logbooks, and some of the relevant experience dates back 10 years, so can be quite difficult. Do you have any recommendations or guidance to help with that?
Well, the best recommendation I would have is start as early as possible. But of course, with HPAS in place for 2 years, we are running at the moment in these sort of issues. So at the moment, we're actually sort of back accrediting people. The idea for the scheme is you start at affiliate and then grow through the levels. And that means you are aware you need a logbook and you will keep on filling it in. However, at the moment, we're looking backwards. Yes, it can be difficult after 10 years. Again, it's a best endeavors method. So we would like to see you doing your utmost best. And that also means that we will not accept none of the logbooks being signed off. But if you come back and say, well, that person at that time, they're no longer working with the company, or even worse, after 10 years, they might have even passed away. The panel will be flexible on that as long as you demonstrate the experience through the various other routes. I mean, in the end, we look at the big picture. We do have a formalized system. We've been recognized by the IHO, so we do want to keep everything in order for as much as possible. But we do recognize practical problems that you may run into. If you run into them, contact us as soon as possible so we can advise you on what to do or what not to do. I mean, it is better than the panel being surprised, or Yvonne probably being surprised by none of the logbooks being signed. That will definitely not be forwarded to the panel, but inform us as soon as possible. That's basically, and try to do your utmost best to get those signatures, to get it in line. Essentially, that's what we expect from you.
Yeah, I think the short version of that is gaps may be okay, but a complete blank is definitely not okay. You should be able to achieve that. I would go as far as saying if you can't achieve any signatures, you're just not trying hard enough, to be frank. You should be able to get that signature, and it doesn't have to be necessarily from the immediate person in charge of that project. It could be a colleague that has replaced them. As long as they can certify that experience that you're quoting is legitimate, effectively.
Okay, I'll move on to a qualification related one regards universities. This is something we know about, but someone is asking, I did my MSc at the University of Plymouth, which is unfortunately not category A certified. What options do I have? It's quite a general question. Maybe either of you could chime in on that.
It's probably me on a requirements basis, but yes, it is unfortunate when it's the same, you know, it might be the same syllabus that the previous year was recognised. It will absolutely tick all of the S5 education boxes in the same way, but unfortunately it does mean you have to take the longer route from education through experience to accreditation at a given level. That's not our call, that is the IBSC call. There is absolutely no way that they would have recognised the scheme in a million years had we said that, well, it's kind of equivalent. It's equivalent is IBSC's least favourite word on the planet. They say there isn't equivalent, it's recognised or it's not recognised. So I'm afraid it's a fairly hard line on that, but it, you know, my defence is it's not really our line. We're just following the IBSC requirement.
It of course also means that when you do get your accreditation, it means something. So you need to pass a certain bar. And yes, this is basically one of the examples. And I see other questions coming in as well, just to mention that, Yvonne. And we're not going to address all these personal questions because there are a lot of questions popping up from persons, how would I qualify? First advice is do the interactive tool, because that can help you out with the question. But the first question, I see some questions about I've done this course, etc., etc. There's a simple solution to knowing whether the course you've taken is accredited or recognized, I should say, sorry, by the IHO, because the IHO publishes a list of courses from when to where a course was recognized and at what level. If your course is not among those lists, you've either been in the industry for quite a long time, and you probably already know whether that was an accredited course or a recognized course by the time you took it. If not, and your certificate doesn't say anything like it was a recognized course, then my best guess is it wasn't. And that goes for most short courses. Realize that a Category B course takes a minimum of 6 months. A Category A course takes a minimum of 1 year, and most of them are longer. So anything shorter than that is guaranteed not to have been a recognized course. Like I said, it's a bit longer answer, but I see quite a few questions coming in on that. When in doubt, of course, you can always ask us, and we will look at your questions and we will come back to them eventually. But take this as a starting point.
David, if you have nothing else to add, I'm going to put a CPD related question forward. We haven't had one of those yet. It is a relatively general question, so hopefully it's something we can address. So if we're looking for CPD and updated knowledge and procedures of hydrographic practices, is there anything that you would recommend the professional hydrographer to do specifically? IHO standards related development, industrial expansion, and related survey practice and all that kind of thing. So is there anything that you could recommend? If that's too specific, then we can always follow up by email.
No, I don't think so. That's you know, what CPD would we recommend? Well, it's a fairly broad spectrum, and it really is everything from. So I've just come back from a conference on remote hydrography in Dublin last week. That's CPD, absolutely, of course. It's for, you know, a formal route to CPD. But I could easily also argue that reading, reading Hydro International or Soundings magazine, here's one I made earlier, or those kind of things, reading the formal articles in there could all be logged as that CPD time. The range is that big. In terms of how do I access the best sources of that CPD, I'm kind of biased, but I'm going to say through your National Hydrographic Society is the first route, because they will be organising regional events around the country, or national events, as we've just had with the UK and Ireland Hydrographic Society. So that's a great route, and they will also the chairs of those branches, for example, will sign off a CPD log just to get that extra sort of formal tick in the box. So, you know, CPD is everything from desk study, you know, researching things online, all the way through to formally attending courses, conferences, and kind of everything in between. It's one thing I've discovered in the creation of this scheme is that CPD understanding and expectations have quite big cultural differences in different jurisdictions. So the way I've just described it is what we would call CPD in the UK, and it's typically not provided by the employer. That's one other really significant point. It's sought out and undertaken by the individual themselves. Their employer may well basically pay them for some of that attendance, but much of it will be in their own time, such as evening meetings with the Hydrographic Society. Actually, in Holland, it's quite different. It's much more expected to be part of the employment package, and TPD will normally be conducted in the day, you know, not an evening event or something like that. So, and it's different in different countries. So, but the way we've built it with a bit of a UK focus, I admit, is that CPD is a very broad spectrum. Just make sure you record it.
I have another one which we've just been asked to clarify on. So I'm just going to put that. That's regarding the logbook. So we go back to a topic that we had, but someone's asked for it to be clarified. Should every logbook entry be accompanied by a report? And how would several loose single day projects be treated, as one report, or would a bundle suffice? It's a very specific question, but it does relate to an important part of the documentation. So we can perhaps start
I
with
can expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, great.
So no, the logbook and the report are two different things. So the logbook demonstrates your entire knowledge or experience, sorry, not your knowledge, your experience. So yes, every project should be logged. If there's a lot of one-day projects that can be bundled because they're all the same, as long as you're clear on how many days you spend working on that, the panel can work with that. I mean, let's be honest, we'd rather have a few pages to go through than a couple of hundred, but they need to be on the same level. So if it's all multi-beam and RTK and stuff like that, all in shallow waters, then yes, you can bundle them and be clear about that. The report is one of these entries. Maybe two, if you can't have a single report demonstrating everything, and it needs to be tied to your logbook. So it can't be a new project that's not in the logbook. That would be very strange. But other than that, there is no relation other than that they're both part of your body of experience, which you're demonstrating. So I hope that clarifies that point.
There's a quick follow-up question, Huibert, if that's okay. Would you require a different logbook for a different company that everybody's worked for, or no?
You don't need to. What you'll see if you keep on working towards an accreditation, and you haven't just yet, is that you'll start keeping a logbook, and then that might be logical to do it company by company, also to demonstrate things within the company. We know that IMCA has their own survey logbook, for example. So if you're already filling in your IMCA logbook, you could use that to demonstrate your knowledge, of course. And then if you switch companies, you might have another logbook or not. In the end, that's up to you, as long as it's documented, but there's no requirement to change logbooks from company to company. The requirement is to demonstrate the amount of experience you have.
So just to follow up, there might be some students on the call as well, just to address one from them. And we might just want to include something on the student pathway through HPAS, if that's relevant. Someone is currently a hydrographic survey student under the Faculty of Geomatics. How do they gain HPAS accreditation as a student? So we can clarify what that actually means for a student.
They apply. It's really there is. I'd say the bar is very low. There is no bar really. I think the only bar is, and I'm doing this from memory from 4 years ago, but is that they get confirmation that they are on an educational program, a relevant educational program. That's it, and pay a very small fee. Which I don't remember what that is, but it's very, very low. And I think actually, if they're a member of a hydrographic society, it's free.
That's correct,
yes.
David. Yes.
Thank you. Right.
Maybe
So
to add
yeah,
to that,
there is no barrier to a student obtaining their affiliate membership to get them on that foundation.
What might be important, because I saw that question earlier in the chat, is can I log my school time as practical experience? So if I did any field work, etc. I'll be honest, it depends a bit on the field work. So I'll also answer the question, because we've had this sort of applications before. Unless it was a project that was executed not as part of the regular curriculum, but as additional fieldwork. So it was maybe a research project where you were completely responsible for everything. Then otherwise the answer would be no, because during the school time, you're not a trained hydrographer yet. That's what the affiliate level is for. So essentially your experience starts after school, after you've gotten your first bit of experience. That's where we start counting. So unless there's a special circumstance, the answer would be no.
Okay, we're just heading towards the final minute. So I just wanted to draw your attention to the follow-up to this event, and I'll leave Hubert and David to finish off.
Okay, well, I think obviously there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered in the chat and in the pre-submitted questions. So what we will try and do, what we will do is bundle those together. Some are very specific to personal circumstances, but there are definite themes in those questions. So we'll try and consolidate that and come up with some sort of more thematic answers, I think, and we can provide those in writing after the event. But otherwise, from me, no, thank you very much for your interest and attention, and apologies for the apologies from Microsoft actually at the outset, but hopefully it wasn't too disturbed for your experience. Hubert?
Yes, just to add on to that, as you've seen, there was a recording running. So the question I saw was, will you publish this presentation? We will do better. We will publish the webinar as is, the form and the time we will give you. And we will also ask you for feedback so that we can improve and maybe implement some other things for next runs. So as a member of the panel, I will hope to see your application soon.
And just a reminder, the deadline is the 31st of March, and I'm here if you've got any further queries, and I'll be sending around the recording and themed responses to any unanswered questions as best we can following this. So stay in touch, and if you didn't register and you were forwarded this link, please pop your email in the chat before you leave so that I can follow up with you as well after the meeting. Thanks, everybody.